The Jurassic period is frequently defined by an arms race, the ceaseless struggle between massive predators and the even more massive herbivores they hunted. We imagine the king of that landscape to be the mighty Allosaurus, its skull a hatchet built for slashing, its legs columns of muscle. But to focus solely on the hunter is to miss the true stunning paradox of this ecosystem. The most formidable creatures in the history of life were not the sharp-toothed meat-eaters. They were the peaceful, long-necked sauropods. And the greatest secrets to their survival may lie in the very anatomy we have long dismissed as purely passive. The long neck, that defining characteristic of the sauropods, is consistently pictured in popular culture as a mere elevated hosepipe, designed simply to browse the treetops, a fragile appendage dedicated only to feeding. When we first study the fossil record, this idea seems logical, elegant even. But when we look closer, when we analyze the cervical vertebrae and the associated muscle attachment scars of some of these giants, a much more dramatic, aggressive, and frankly shocking truth emerges about how these immense structures were actually used. The story we've been told about the giraffe-like gentle giant is beginning to crack under the weight of biomechanical analysis. The necks of giants like Apatosaurus or Diplodocus were certainly used for feeding, a crucial adaptation that allowed them to corner the highest resources. Yet, the anatomy suggests they were also built for extreme, violent forces. This is the next paradox. The structure that appears longest and most delicate in illustrations may have been one of the most robust, weaponized parts of their enormous bodies. Look specifically at the shape and fusion of the centra, the main body of the vertebrae. In species where the neck was extremely long, such as Mamenchisaurus, we see a complex network of ligaments and robust muscle attachments far exceeding what would be necessary simply to support the head or lift leaves. Furthermore, the positioning of the neural spines and transverse processes, the bony outgrowths that anchor muscle and tendon, often suggests the ability to withstand significant, directed lateral and dorsal stress. This is stress that comes not from gravity or browsing, but from active combat. The sheer volume of the neck region in many sauropods implies an immense musculature. When we analyze the paleoecology of the late Jurassic, we see that sauropods were often competing for mates, territory, and access to key seasonal resources. This competition demands a behavioral mechanism for resolving conflict without fatal injury to the combatants. The gentle grazer myth, driven largely by early, superficial interpretations, fails to account for the competitive pressures of the largest herbivores the Earth has ever known. This realization reframes the entire relationship between the sauropods and their environment, suggesting their necks were not just feeding apparatus, but potentially devastating clubs wielded in titanic displays of intraspecific dominance. Now, let's open the fossil record and resurrect the story of this Jurassic titan. The competitive landscape of the late Jurassic was one of ultimate scale. The largest creatures required the most resources, which made contests for dominance inevitable. The fossil evidence, once analyzed through the lens of paleoecology, strongly supports the idea that intraspecific combat was a critical factor in the lives of many sauropods. We are not talking about simple shoving matches. We are looking at the possibility of complex, ritualized combat where the neck served as the primary weapon. The sheer mass and momentum behind a sauropod's neck, even a lighter, more streamlined one, would generate extraordinary force. To understand the mechanics, we can turn to the concept of comparative paleontology. We see a striking functional convergence in many modern animals that engage in intense intraspecific combat over mates or territory, specifically neck wrestling or striking. The most famous analog is the giraffe, which uses its neck and skull as a swinging club, a behavior known as necking, to establish dominance. While the sauropod neck was horizontally oriented, not vertically like the giraffe's, the principle of using a heavy, muscular appendage for blunt force trauma remains the same. Consider the anatomical features of robust sauropods, like Apatosaurus, where the cervical ribs are heavily reinforced and often fused to the vertebrae. This anatomical rigidity is entirely inconsistent with a structure that is only designed for gentle, sweeping movements to reach foliage. Instead, it suggests a column built to resist twisting and compression, the very forces generated during a powerful strike, or the locking, twisting grapple of neck wrestling. We can analyze the neck in different segments, moving away from the assumption that the entire structure behaved uniformly. The base of the neck, closest to the torso, appears extremely well muscled and supported, serving as a powerful lever and shock absorber. This segment would provide the incredible kinetic energy necessary to accelerate the distal far end. The midsection often exhibits a high degree of intervertebral articulation, allowing for flexibility and the necessary rapid curve motion needed for striking. It is precisely in this midsection where the musculature would have generated maximum velocity. The ultimate goal of such combat would not necessarily be to cause a catastrophic injury, but to exhaust or intimidate the rival, which aligns perfectly with the observation that we rarely find sauropod bones with obvious fatal combat wounds. Ritualized combat, like the neck striking we hypothesize, is about displaying strength and forcing submission. The sheer visual impact of two giants locking their immense necks, twisting and pushing to force the opponent's head or torso down, would have been a high-stakes, edge-of-your-seat spectacle on the Jurassic Plains. The winner secures breeding rights, access to the best feeding grounds, or leadership of the herd. This resolves a key paleoecological puzzle. How did these animals manage competition when their enormous size made conventional fighting, like biting or kicking, too dangerous and energy-intensive? The neck offered a specialized, powerful, and relatively safer alternative. This theory finds further support when we examine the ecological niche of different sauropod families. Some species, particularly the diplodocids with their low, stiff necks, may have used them as powerful rams or battering devices. Others, like the Mamenchisaurids, with their exceptionally long, flexible necks, may have engaged in the more complex, serpentine neck wrestling, using their length and musculature for a display of overwhelming strength and stamina, not unlike the giraffe's approach, but on a truly colossal scale. We are slowly myth-busting the gentle giant archetype, replacing it with the image of a titan that was dominant not just through its size, but through a specialized, violent display of strength, a truly fearsome adaptation preserved in the rock. The cervical vertebrae are a geological diary recording the competitive battles of an ancient world. The very structures that allowed them to eat were simultaneously their means of establishing sovereignty. The acceptance that sauropods utilized their necks for combat represents a profound shift in our understanding of Jurassic paleoecology. It elevates these enormous herbivores from mere grazing targets into truly dynamic competitors that occupied a complex and intensely contested ecological niche. This anatomical specialization, the robust, highly muscularized neck, was not a biological accident. It was a defining, adaptive legacy refined over millions of years to cope with the unique challenges of being the largest animals on the planet. When we consider the full evolutionary arc of the sauropods, this theory of weaponized necks makes perfect sense. The pressure to grow larger was driven by predator avoidance, the sheer size being the ultimate defense against the theropods like Allosaurus. But this size brought intense intraspecific competition for limited, high-quality food, water, and mating opportunities. A simple pushing contest or a low-intensity, display-based threat was insufficient for resolving conflict between animals weighing tens of tons. Instead, natural selection favored those individuals whose necks could deliver the most powerful, persuasive blow, or whose stamina allowed them to endure a longer, twisting grapple for dominance. The very fossils that once seemed to confirm the image of the passive giant now testify to its fierceness. We can trace the development of these features across different sauropod lineages. The fusion of the cervical ribs, the deep indentations for massive neck muscles, and the unique arrangement of the ligaments all paint a picture of specialized strength that had a singular purpose beyond browsing. The fossil record, therefore, preserves a forgotten chapter of gigantic ritualistic fighting that took place on the primeval Earth, a silent drama of dominance written in bone. This insight into the sauropod's behavior fundamentally changes how we view the Jurassic ecosystem. It reveals a world where the power hierarchy was not simply determined by teeth and claws, but by surprising specializations, massive display, and the calculated application of immense biological leverage. It underscores a core truth of evolution. Every anatomical feature, no matter how seemingly benign, must be functionally justified by the demands of survival. In the case of the long neck, its function was dual: to feed the giant and to fight for the right to continue existing. When we look upon the colossal, fossilized neck of an Apatosaurus, we no longer see just a high-rise feeding crane. We see a perfectly engineered, prehistoric war club, designed not for slaying predators, but for securing a future. The sheer scale of these creatures, once lost to deep time, continues to challenge our imagination, demanding that we reevaluate every assumption we hold. We started by looking at a neck built for browsing, and ended by uncovering a powerful, elegant weapon. This is the ultimate lesson. The rocks teach us that the ancient worlds were full of nuanced behaviors and specialized adaptations, far stranger and more compelling than we ever assumed. The competitive spirit of the Jurassic giants is not only a story of survival, but a timeless testament to the relentless, inventive pressures of evolution, a legacy in stone that speaks of conflict, adaptation, and the sheer wonder of life's most colossal forms.